Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to MusicForever, where today we're reviewing Metallica's Garage Incorporated. Before actually starting the review here today, I just want to remind anyone who may be new to the channel that I'm reviewing all of Metallica's albums here on my channel, and there's going to be a playlist link down in the description below, as well as annotated at the end of the video, where you can check out that playlist that already has all the reviews that I've done up to this point, as well as it's going to have all the ones I'm going to do in the future for Metallica. Those should be coming out shortly after this one. So, if you're a Metallica fan, definitely check that out. And without wasting any more time, let's get talking about this album here, Garage Incorporated, which isn't really a studio album from Metallica because it's just a collection of cover songs. 2 discs long. This is technically a double album, though I'm not quite sure if I really consider it that, considering only the first disc here consists of new material. The second disc is just a collection of older cover songs that they put out over the years, compiled all together to be, the second disc here for this project. As a result of that, I'm just going to be talking about each of these 2 halves of this album separately. First, we're going to start talking about the first disc here, which is the disc consisting of the new content that Metallica made for this album, and it contains actually some of the more popular songs from this album, as well as just Metallica's career in general. Overall, the bands Metallica choose to cover on this album, not just the first disc, but the second disc as well, could be described as lots of the bands that inspired Metallica themselves. Lots of new waves of British heavy metal bands, lots of classic heavy metal bands or hard rock bands, lots of hardcore punk bands. That's mostly what you're seeing here in terms of the bands that they cover. And there's certain bands that get covered a lot here on this double album here. You can see a lot of Diamond Head and Overkill, who have 4 tracks at the end of the second disc here. Discharge also get 2 tracks here on the first disc. There's lots of artists that get repeated in terms of what they're covering, and I see this as, to a degree, a good thing and a bad thing, because I think it's somewhat of a bad thing because instead of getting a diverse amount of artists that Metallica are covering here, you get to see certain artists repeated just a lot, and sometimes I would like to see a bit more diversity in who they're covering, because I think Metallica has the potential to do interesting takes on lots of different artists. But at the same time, it's important to note that these are some of the artists that inspired Metallica, and that's why they're covering them. And at the same time, it's also important to note that the second disc here, like I said, it's just a collection of covers that they've put out over the years, sometimes as part of a previous EP that they released consisting of covers, or as well as a part of B-sides to singles in the past and things of that sort. So it kind of makes sense that some of them might be repeating artists because they were never intended to be repeating artists in their original format, or maybe that was the point, like with those 4 Overkill tracks I was mentioning, not Overkill, Motorhead tracks. Overkill is one of the tracks that they're covering. That's kind of important. Overkill is a completely different band, but yeah, those 4 tracks were initially a part of a single. I forgot what song they were the B-side to, but pretty much, I guess in that context, the 4 Motorhead tracks are, kind of interesting because it's those 4, but here it's just kind of like you get 4 tracks by them right at the end, and that can kind of get not tedious to listen to exactly, but you might want to hear Metallica covering some different artists. But going back to the first disc we got here, like I was saying before, you got some songs that have kind of become staples to, I guess you could say, Metallica's collection. Take, for example, the track Whiskey in the Jar, which, lots of people know the song as one of Metallica's most well-known tracks, I would have to say, which is kind of strange considering it's a cover song, but then again, there are some artists that manage to do that. And I can definitely understand why this song manages to be so popular, and that's really just because it has sort of a fun, upbeat atmosphere to the track. It kind of reminds me of songs like Fuel, which is also another big hit for Metallica from their album Reload. Kind of like that song, this song has a bit of an upbeat feel to it, and it's just a song I think many people can find themselves enjoying and just having a good time listening to, and that's why I think it's managed to become as popular as it is. But there's also other songs on here that kind of managed to be popular for different reasons. Take the cover of Turn the Page, originally by Bob Seger, and this track shows Metallica's more soft side, kind of a more ballad type side. And I could definitely understand why it's popular as well, because those type of tracks tend to do well with, the popular masses as well. But the track on this first disc that really stands out to me is the Mercyful Fate cover, or covers, I guess you could say. The track is just titled Mercyful Fate, but it consists of covers of a variety of Mercyful Fate songs kind of meshed together. And I was kind of confused at first as to how Metallica was going to do this, considering one of the big drawing points to Mercyful Fate, the band, is King Diamond's vocals, which are, if you're familiar with Mercyful Fate or King Diamond's solo career, his vocals are just kind of out of this world, high-pitched, kind of wailing almost, and, it's not something that's easy to replicate or even, come close to replicating. So, I was kind of concerned as to how James Hetfield was going to approach covering these tracks. Was he going to, try his hardest to replicate King Diamond and, ultimately fail doing so? Or was he just going to do his own thing with it? And I'm happy that he went the latter of those and tried to do his own thing with it. He doesn't exactly try to replicate King Diamond here, because I think if he tried to do that, it just wouldn't have turned out well at all. Instead, he just takes his own kind of vocal approach to it, and manages to make these classic Mercyful Fate songs, or parts of their songs, Metallica's. I think it's the most enjoyable track here on the album. It's over 10 minutes long because, like I said, it consists of multiple songs being kind of thrown together, but it's not boring for a single moment of it, and I like what Metallica are able to do here with this track. It's definitely the highlight here. On the other hand, on the second disc, kind of a problem I have with some of the Motorhead tracks I was kind of talking about earlier is that I feel like James Hetfield is trying too hard to sound like Lemmy in terms of his vocal delivery. He's just trying to sound a bit growlier and deeper with his voice, and it's not necessarily that he doesn't pull it off to some degree, it's just that it's noticeable that he's trying to sound a bit more like Lemmy. I kind of wish that he'd try to just do his own vocal style with it, and that maybe it'd work better then. But, you know, that's kind of a small complaint. I do still enjoy those 4 tracks that come at the end of this second disc, and I think they're very enjoyable. Another cover that I find really interesting on the first disc here is the cover of Lynyrd Skynyrd's Tuesday Is Gone, which features some famous musicians like Les Claypool of Primus and Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains, as well as many other popular musicians from popular bands. And it's a very interesting collective of musicians you get here on this track, along with Metallica, and it just creates a very interesting track, something a bit different here on the first disc, and it sees Metallica covering artists that are a bit different than, you know, hardcore punk groups or earlier heavy metal bands and things of that sort. And it's always interesting when Metallica managed to do that here on either of these 2 discs, for that matter. It just kind of stands out for that reason. Another interesting thing that appears on the second disc here is the temporary, sort of brief return of Cliff Burton on the bass during the tracks Am I Evil and Blitzkrieg. Of course, these tracks were recorded with him initially while he was still alive, and that's why he appears here. Like I said, the second disc consists of tracks that were previously released in one way or another, and as a result, these are some of the oldest tracks on that disc, and he appears on the bass there instead of Jason Newsted, who does the bass on all the other tracks on both discs. And overall, he does a good job here on the bass. Like I said, Cliff Burton is just a legendary bassist at this point, and that's not to discredit Jason Newsted either, because he's also a great bassist. Overall, both of them do a great job whenever they appear. I'm not going to act like the 2 tracks that Cliff appears on are some of the best work that he's done with Metallica, but they are serviceable and very good. Now, in terms of talking about the length of this project, this, like I said in some of my previous reviews from Metallica, in my opinion, ever since the release of Load, Metallica's biggest issue as a band in terms of their albums is the runtime of their albums. And this one, looking at it, it's definitely a very long project. It's over 2 hours long with 2 separate parts, each consisting of over an hour in length. So, you know, right off the bat, you kind of think to yourself, well, this album is like perfect contender for having that fault, you know, for being way too long. But the thing is, I'm not quite sure if I could say that for this project, considering the entire second disc consists of older tracks being compiled together. And it seems a bit unfair to kind of complain that it's too long when the whole second disc is older material and only the first disc is new material, which on its own doesn't seem to run particularly long. If you listen to either of these parts just on their own, neither of them seem to last longer than they need to. They all run an appropriate amount of time. They're not short by any means, but they're there and they do a serviceable job in terms of the length and the runtime. But if you're listening to this entire thing all the way through both discs, you're in for a long one here. It's just could be a bit long, could be dragged on a bit, but you know, my solution to that is listen to the 2 discs separately, and you know, I really can't fault Metallica for that, considering the entire second disc is new material here. And it's not like they make either disc super long or longer than it needs to be, really, is what I'm trying to get at. Overall, it definitely is a very long Metallica project. It still does follow that pattern of Metallica releasing long albums, but at the same time, considering the entire second disc is older material, as well as the fact that this is all cover material, it's not new songs or anything like that, I'm not as obliged to kind of, you know, complain about it here on this album like I would for some of their other material, some of the other new material, really, where it does kind of get in the way of the album's quality. Overall, I have to say that Garage Incorporated is a very interesting Metallica project, and I think it's somewhat underrated when it comes to Metallica's discography, or kind of forgotten, considering some of the albums that surrounded it, the Load Reload collection of albums, which wasn't exactly super popular amongst fans, and then followed by Saint Anger, which was not very popular either. We'll get there, believe me. So, you know, I feel like it's forgotten in that context of what surrounded it, considering the quality of the material here on this project. This might be one of the better Metallica albums released for the time period. And, you know, while certain songs are well recognized, like Whiskey in the Jar or Turn the Page, even some of the, like the Mercyful Fate cover even is a bit well known amongst fans, but still, I feel like a lot of the material on both of these discs goes a bit unnoticed, because, you know, they are covers, and it wasn't a studio album per se, because it's, you know, like I said before, all covers, and it is a rather long project. But if you're a Metallica fan and you kind of avoided this project for years just because you thought it wouldn't be super good, or because, you know, it's covers you didn't think you'd be interested in or anything like that, or just slipped under your radar, you should definitely check this project out because there are many redeemable qualities here, and it is one of the better albums Metallica put out in the late 90s and the early 2000s. It's better than Load, Reload, or Saint Anger, in my opinion. And it's just, overall, one of the better Metallica albums from that time period, pretty much. While some of the tracks here may not exactly suit you if you're a fan of the thrashier Metallica, especially on the first disc, there are lots of heavier moments. Like I said, they cover hardcore punk groups, and when Metallica managed to do that, they do kind of return to the thrashier side that they were showed in the 1980s here, because they make these songs more of a thrash metal style as opposed to a hardcore punk style. And yeah, pretty much before Death Magnetic kind of returned the thrash to Metallica, this album kind of temporarily did with some of the tracks that they managed to cover here. So if you're a fan of the thrashier 80s Metallica, there are some material here on this album that needs to be checked out by you. That's pretty much everything I have to say about this project. It's a good Metallica album. It's not one of the greatest, not one of the most memorable, but it is still kind of underrated and a very good project overall. I definitely have to recommend it to you. And with that, I think I'm going to end my review right there. If you enjoyed this video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future Metallica reviews and just other new album reviews and music-related content in general. Comment down below, what are your thoughts on this double album here? What's your favorite tracks from this album? I greatly appreciate seeing that. Make sure to follow me on all the social medias linked down in the description below. Thank you guys for watching again, and stay golden.